Hey, Walter Sorrells back with more tips for the knife maker. Today, making a Kydex sheath for this cool little knife right here. So last week I posted a video about the making of this cool little knife right here, which is based on my forthcoming Eclipse model, which is this little knife right here. Now, as I promised in that video, today I'll be showing you how to make a Kydex sheath for pocket carrying the blade. Link in the cards and description to the previous video if you're interested in seeing how that was made. So for those of you who might be looking around for a first knife making project, you don't have tons of gear, this one right here is made exclusively with a file. There's no belt grinder required, so it might be a good starting place. All right. Enough preliminaries, let's get rolling on the project. This is Kydex. It's a thermoplastic, meaning that when you heat it up, it gets kind of floppy and soft so you can mold it. Then when it cools, it keeps whatever shape you smushed it or bent it or otherwise formed it into. It generally has a textured side that's used for the exteriors of sheaths and holsters and a shiny, smooth side that's for the inside. This is 0.06 inches thick, which to me is by far the best thickness for sheaths. You can saw it, cut it, or do what I'm doing here, which is scoring it with a knife, then snapping it. There are tons of different ways of forming Kydex. In my production knives, I use a vacuum forming system and a CNC machine, but this little workhorse right here is where I started. It's a homemade Kydex former that I welded together about 20 years ago. It's composed of a hinged frame and a spongy forming surface made from inch-thick neoprene rubber. Actually, the very first one of these that I made, this was probably 25 years ago, was just plywood. So they can be super simple. And of course you can buy them pre-made from knife making supply houses. For today's project, I'll be making a two-piece sheath. Again, many ways of doing this. You can tape it together, fold them over, drill the holes first and rivet them before heating, you name it. I'll do the absolute simplest approach, which is just to cut two pieces and slap them together. Now, I'm using a t-shirt press to heat the Kydex. When I started out, I used a toaster oven, then I switched to using my heat treating oven. Anything that'll get them up hot enough will work. I heated them to 330 degrees in the oven, but with the press, I go 350 Fahrenheit for 1 minute. Always good policy to pre-position everything so you know where you're going to do whatever it is that you're doing. After 1 minute, I'll pull it out. You can see exactly how floppy it is, basically like a lasagna noodle. Now if the edges curl up or if the pattern kind of starts to smear, you get bubbling, anything like that, you're going way too hot. So we just plop one down, then put the knife on top, then the other piece on top of that, then close up the press and clamp the snot out of it. Some people put tape on the knife to thicken it up and give it a little more wiggle room, but I didn't bother to do that here. You want it to cool pretty close to room temperature. If you take it out too early, it's going to start to lose definition. I'll check it with a heat gun. Still a little warm, though you could get away with hitting it with some compressed air and just moving right on. Quick note, if you're interested in making the knife that I'm using in this video, I do have plans available. Now, I do not sell them or give them away, but I do make them available to all my supporters on Patreon, no matter what level. So all you have to do in return for the plans is to support the channel on Patreon. Any pledge level will give you access, like I said, to all the plans that I've done through the years. I've been doing YouTube videos almost every week for 15 years now on YouTube, sword making, knife making, all kinds of tools that you might use in making knives or swords. So as you can imagine, that is a lot of plans. Patreon.com/Walter Sorrells. Okay, back to the build. And now I'll drill the rivet holes. Like I said earlier, there's really no one right way to do this, no one right order to do it. But the Kydex sticks together, so now's a great time to drill it and be assured that the holes will line up correctly. If you drill them before heating, they'll tend to distort and be in the wrong place. I made this little U-shaped fixture, if that isn't too pretentious a word for it, out of HDPE plastic. What this does is it allows the knife section to sort of drop and keep that Kydex flat so that it's easy to drill. Then over to the drill press and we'll drill up the holes. Next, I'll rivet it together using these 1/4-inch rivets. Rivets have a variety of shank lengths, so make sure you get the right size for the thickness of material you're using. In this case, it's a number 8-6 size rivet. I use an arbor press now for forming the rivets, but you can buy these little flaring dies and they work great. Just put the pre-flared end in the little bottom cradle. Then tap the die on top a couple times with a hammer. All riveted up, looks super ugly, so we'll need to trim all this extra off of here, get everything evened up. Now you can just grind it or you can saw some off and then do the final work on the grinder. I like to do most of the work with a heavy grit belt, in this case a 36 grit ceramic. The finer the abrasive you use, the more that the Kydex just starts to melt and make a mess. Once I get it properly shaped, then I'll take the last bit with a 120 grit belt. Let's test it out. Well, it is super tight right now, so we're going to have to open up the neck just a tiny bit, and that's really pretty normal with this type of process. I'll do this with a heat gun. Key thing is you want to make sure that your heat is limited to as small or fine a spot as possible, just the exact place that you're trying to move. If you just go blasting away on the whole sheath, you just end up losing all definition and then it doesn't work anymore. So I made this little wood form to isolate the place that I want to soften. If you do this kind of thing very often, you'll end up making a bunch of these kind of little tools, and then you'll have a sort of library of things to do all the possible variations that you might run into. As soon as it gets soft, I'll just open up the neck a tiny bit. You can do this with your fingers, or as in this case, just kind of poke the knife down in there until it kind of opens up the gap a little bit. You don't want to go too far and get rid of the detent completely, just enough that it's easier to get in there. There, that goes in pretty nicely. One thing to always be aware of with Kydex is that as you use it, it starts to wear away. So you want to err on the side of being a little bit tight rather than making it too loose, because eventually it'll get super loose and then it'll be easy for the knife to fall out. I'll finish up the sheath on this little abrasive wheel called a super wheel. A million uses for this thing. The guys at Pops put me onto these things, and I'm a huge fan of them now. All I'm doing is smoothing the periphery and removing any burrs that might be there. Now it's made to go in the pocket, so you want a little bit of a thumb ramp. I'm just going to grind a hair more off to give the thumb a more comfortable landing spot. You can also flare that out and really give you a big fat place to put your thumb on. That's an even better way to do it. Also, you might want to put a clip on here. There are a lot of different ways you can set this up, but that's where we're landing. All right, that about wraps it up. Like I said, the only unusual piece of gear is the Kydex press and this little cheap and simple rivet setter. So it's just not an expensive thing to get into. It's a lot of fun. You can do sheaths, holsters, and all kinds of other cool things for holding tools and stuff like that. As you can see by the crudeness of the little Kydex press that I made, it's very simple and easy to make them. Maybe I'll do a video about how you can make one yourself. No promises, but of course you can also buy them from, knife making supply places. Oh, and by the way, if you're interested in pre-ordering this right here, the actual Tactics Armory Eclipse model, I'll have the first run available a week to 10 days, something like that. So go on tacticsarmory.com to get more information on how you can save a bundle and get your Eclipse before they're all sold out. All right, guys, thanks for watching, and see you soon. Thanks for watching, guys. If you like what we're doing here, please subscribe and make sure that you click on that bell so you get notified of all the latest videos. Want to buy a knife from me? Check out my modern blades at tacticsarmory.com. Digging the channel? You can support our video making efforts on Patreon. I've been banging away on these videos for like 10 years, so I hope you'll show some love for all that hard work. Link in the cards and descriptions. Finally, if you're interested in making Japanese swords, check out my full line of Japanese sword videos where I show how to forge Japanese swords as well as how to polish them and how to make fittings, handles, and scabbards. Walter Sorrells Blades.com.